Okay. It's good that all of you could join you. We have a very special guest today. We have Julia, and her book name is Julia Shalom Jordan. And she wrote a book that I actually got a copy of, and I got to share this with you because in my heart, one of the things that I've learned over the years is the importance of this area we're going to discuss. And in 1990, the Lord gave me a message called the Lazarus Generation, because I came out of the hippie generation. How many remember the hippie generation? You know, we were calm in our rebellion. We were kind of kind in our rebellion, you know, more or less. Our sinning was done with peace.
Right.
But today's generation, it's death, goth, Satan. Did you know that kids are being taught Satanism even in schools? The philosophy of Satanism doesn't mean devil worship. It's a philosophy of humanism. Yep. It's the philosophy of evolutionism. That is Satanism.
Yes.
Whether you know it or not, communism, socialism,
yep,
and all these other isms. In fact, you'll find out isms in the Bible are not ever good. And neither are the ites. They all come from the same place. But anyway, the Lord told me, He said, you know, I want you to preach a message called the Lazarus Generation, because that group of people that are going to be in the earth, they're dead and they stinketh. That's what He told me, just like Lazarus. He said, but I'm going to roll the stone away and call them out of the grave. Now listen though. He says, when that happens, the church has got to be prepared, because these people are going to come in and they're going to need help. Because notice what I said in the scripture here. He said, I called them out of the grave, but then I turned to my disciples and I said, you loose them and let them go.
Right.
So this is what we're going to be talking about today, is something that you are going to have to deal with, and I'm going to have to deal with whether we like it or not. So we better learn that people out there are hurting and they need help. Everybody say amen. It's a marvelous and amazing testimony. I read her book in one night, and so I'm glad she could come. Amen. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. All right, I want to get right into this, and I'm just going to start asking questions, and you can kind of fill in the blanks.
All right.
But I'd like to talk, because I know it's always important to talk about a little bit about our childhood.
Yeah.
Just share a little bit about your childhood and all of that.
Well, I grew up in the church. I went to a Baptist high school, and all the way from grade school all the way up to when I graduated. And we had a class of about 35 people. And I grew up with the same people, and that's kind of my church and my school were at the same building. So I was there Monday through Friday, and then Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and then Saturday visitation. So I mean, I was pretty involved. You know, my mom was working with the deaf ministry, and that's kind of my background with that.
Were your parents Christians?
Yes. My parents. My dad was a deacon in the church, and my mom worked with the deaf people. Okay,
and so this is a church you grew up in, and how was your experience with that? I mean,
well, my heart was, I remember doing the salvation prayer when I was about 4 years old. I remember my aunt had told me about Jesus, and I said, I want that. And so I prayed, and I don't think I realized at the time what I was saved from. I didn't really know what sin was, but I knew I wanted Jesus. And so, and I remember my mom telling me all the time she would have to tell me to be quiet because I'd be on the bus and be like, you know, I don't want you to go to hell, and I would be telling that to strangers, and she said, you can't do that. So, and I specifically remember one story. My girlfriend says, you know, I remember when we had a sleepover one time, you said, I got something I got to tell you, but I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but I think I'm Jesus's favorite. And I remember feeling the love of Christ and really loving God. And as I got older and grew up in the church, I had a lot of questions, you know, things that didn't make sense. They had a lot of rules at the school and stuff, and I didn't understand biblically where they were coming up with the reasons of why we couldn't do certain things, why these people were bad people and these people were good people, and I didn't really see it like that. So they called me a rebel rouser and a problem, and so because I don't really know if they even had the answers. So I think I was asking questions they didn't have answers to, and instead of saying we don't really know or we could lead you over here, that's kind of what happened with me. And I think I just got bitter. I said, okay, well, if this is God's people, every time I tried to ask a question, it felt like I I was getting the door slammed in my face. And I had an earnest heart that really wanted to know God more. And so it's okay to say you don't know. And I think in a leadership position, if you don't know at all, you're not supposed to. God doesn't reveal to everybody everything. But I wasn't told that. I was told, you don't ask questions. And so...
So, was it kind of a legalistic type of deal?
Yes, it was very legalistic, yes.
Yeah. So, in other words, it was don't, and there's no do's, and
there was no love of God, and no love at all.
So, how was your family life?
Well, my mom was a wonderful mom, and my dad was a great provider. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. And my dad was a mechanic, and he worked as an electrician. And to raise 5 kids, he had to work 3 jobs. And so he was a great provider, but he wasn't there. And he wasn't physically there. He wasn't emotionally there. And I'm so thankful that I did not come from an abusive background. My dad never beat me or raped me or anything like that. But was he a loving dad? Did he ever tell me he loved me? Never once. Did he ever hold me or tell me I was special? Never once. Or anything. So I didn't have a connection with my father at all.
Well, that's important, isn't it?
It's very important.
And later on in the story, you'll see why this is important. And I come from the same type of situation. My dad was just the type of person. He's a great provider, made lots of money, worked hard. But I'll tell you what, that's rejection.
Yeah.
And when rejection is where the enemy can get a toehold. And I really believe that's what began to happen in Julie's life. And I'm just sharing my 2 cents worth here. She can correct me if I'm wrong. But that bitterness from the church, the resentment, and then that part with the dad. It's very important. By the way, everybody, you ought to know this is a fatherless generation.
Yes.
And we have to, ladies and gentlemen, reach out and be... us men that are godly men, we need to be father figures, good father figures, and that's important. And so anyway, you grew up, and then you got into your teens, and tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I always loved to read, and I was kind of a nerd that way, I guess. I was Miss Popular in my little school, and I had a brother that was a year younger than me, and I actually ended up taking 4th grade twice because I was just Miss Popular. So I always had to have friends and always had to pass notes, and I just didn't pay attention at school at all. And so ended up being where I wasn't getting math, and my mom's like, well, would you like to retake this 4th grade again because you're slipping here? And so it ended up being me and my brother ended up graduating together. And I'm sorry, I got off the point. What was the question?
Your teenage years. So, you and your brother are close. That comes later. It's very, your brother and you have a good relationship.
Good relationship. Yes. But so unfortunately, that unfortunate situation forced me to go the opposite way. So when I took 4th grade again, I became really into school. I wanted to get straight A's. I became a perfectionist personality because for the first time in my life, I was not popular. Everyone thought I was stupid. So I said, I will never be called stupid again. I'm going to be the top of my class. So I went the other direction, and I said, I am going to get straight A's. And I hit the books hard, and I was class president twice, and I was just very, very a go-getter. And that was my high school experience. I'm sorry, I'm going off again. So
no, that's right. You're doing fine, Julius. I just amazed at this because it seemed to me that was it inside? Maybe I'm wrong about this, but were you trying to somehow maybe do these things to try to get your father to pay more attention?
When I look back at it now, I remember not feeling important.
Yeah.
I remember feeling like whatever I had to say, people would try and quiet me up, and I had a lot of energy, and I had a lot of questions, and I did want to feel important, and I didn't. Did
he ever come to you and say, you're doing great in school, I'm so proud of you?
Actually, he did the opposite. Yeah. I would come to him and ask him about, especially math. I had such a hard time, and he would laugh and say, what are you, stupid? And it was like an adult saying that to a 9-year-old kid, and when he told me that I was stupid, and then my teacher actually said, don't ever do anything to do with math. You are the worst person I've ever seen in math. So between him and that, I became this nervous wreck, and I said, I can't go out in the world and be stupid. So I said, I put everything into school. I would get home from school and I would study for 4 hours. And I was the only kid that did this. I would study for pop quizzes just in case they would happen. And I made sure that I got extra credit, and I just overcompensated for all of it because I said I'll never be a loser, because too many people have told me that I have a tendency, loser tendencies, so I'm going to overcome that by being the best at everything. And so that's what happened with that. During that time, I guess because I went to a private school and we dressed differently, like our cheerleaders had long, like we called them ding-dongs. They were just long, like culottes. Yeah. And we really stood out because we would play with public schools. And so we would get laughed at because we looked so different. We had to dress different. We had to wear nylons when we were 10 years old. And so we looked like old church ladies, and we were little kids.
Dear Jesus.
Yeah. So during my teenage years, I had met a girl that said, you know, I know this really fun. She wasn't from my school. She goes, I'm going to show you how to have real fun. She goes, why don't you sneak out with me and go to the city? So I'm from the suburbs, and I said, oh, this sounds like exciting, you know. I was still a good girl, but I wanted to go and experience life, you know, and I was so driven at school. It was really like a nice release for me. She took me out. We went out to the clubs, got into, I don't even know how I got in, because people would actually look at the ID and they would laugh because I looked like I was 12. And they would just let me in. And I would go out dancing with my girlfriends all night long, and then it was great because I was a rock star on the weekend, and then I would be a good girl during the week, and I would get good grades. And that's how I balanced my life, because my life was overwhelmingly stressful for me. So I had developed a split personality where I said, okay, you want to see the good girl, I'll be the good girl, but I also need to relax and be normal too. And so I created this escapism mentality where I got away.
Wow. Our lives are so much alike, me and her. I'm telling you, honest to God. So you kind of look for a family somewhere else a little bit. Kind of, yes, I did. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
I didn't think about it like that, but
and if you really think about it, what happened to her was all this pressure and everything. She's anything but stupid. It's very apparent. But, you know, the words are powerful. Yeah. What we say to our kids, listen, death and life are in the power of the tongue. What you say to your kids can literally bring about demonic stuff. Yes. And so all this background, she's going through this, and she's trying. And then she reminds me, Stella was my wife's not here, so she reminds me a little bit of my wife, you know. So I was thinking, I said, you know, Stella was the disco queen too, you know. but anyway, so anyway, you started going to these clubs and stuff, and then you kind of went to college. Why don't you pick it up?
So I was determined to go to college, you know, and I went to school, and my parents couldn't afford to help me financially. So I got a couple grants, but I really was overwhelmed because I couldn't decide what I really wanted to do. I didn't know what I was good at. I just knew I wanted to go to school. I didn't want to be a stupid person. So I signed up for school, and I was nervous because for the first time in my life I had to pay for things. You know, I was worried about student loans. That just freaked me out, to owe money. And so during one of my classes, I was kind of really stressed out, and I said, I'm stressed about money. This money situation is really freaking me out. She goes, well, you know what I do? She's like, just so you know, I'm a dancer, and I work at a strip club on the weekends, and I make great money. She goes, you would make great money. She goes, just try it once. And of course I said, well, I don't know, that's my thing. But I did go out dancing on the weekends, so I said, well, I mean, I already go to the dance clubs and wear kind of short dresses there. She goes, it's just a bikini contest. You don't even have to take your clothes off. It's just a bikini contest, and you can win $500. And so I said, she goes, I'm going this weekend. She goes, we'll drive together. And if you win, you win. If you don't, you don't. You try it at least. And so I said, well, I really need the money, so why not? She goes, this once no one will know you or see you or recognize you. So I did the contest, and they tricked me, actually. So I do the contest, I win this contest, and I'm shocked that I actually won, because there was professional dancers there with the whole tassels and the get-up and the glitter, and I just was a girl that was like, woo! You know, I got on stage, and I was so nervous, I just started screaming for myself, because I was thinking that people wouldn't yell for me, so I was like, if I'm loud, then maybe they'll get loud. And so I ended up winning, and I don't know why or how, but they said, well, you get $250 tonight, and you get the rest of it on your first night of shift. And that's how they kind of got me, is I felt like, well, I mean, I earned this, I won this, you know, and I got to get my other half. And they said, well, I don't know if you understand how the stripping world works, but this is what it's very horrible how they treat these girls. But they charge these girls to work every night. So even whether you make money or whether you don't make money, you still have to pay what's called a house fee. And if you're late, or if you're late on stage, or if you're not wearing the right outfit, they have fines. And so these girls can end up coming into work being fined. If they didn't come up with that amount of money the last time that they worked, they will show up to work owing money. So it's literally, it is like prostitution, kind of like with a pimp. And so you walk in with a debt, and you walk in with owing money. And so you get trapped in there, and you're so used to making, you know, it's like gambling. You can make thousands of dollars in one night, or you can make nothing. And every night is a gamble. So it's a very stressful job, and there's a lot of pressure. So I didn't realize that, you know, my first night there, they said, you don't have to pay the house fee. And I didn't even know what a house fee was. I was like, fine, you know. I showed up to work, and I had never made money in my entire life like that kind of money. I just was persistent. So I said, you know, this is, you know, if I can make $10 a dance, you know, if I danced all night long, the manager pulled me aside. He says, you're causing a ruckus. I mean, all the girls are like saying, you know, how much money are you making? You're just making money, you know. Like I wouldn't sit down for a break. I wouldn't sit down for a cigarette. I didn't sit down to chat. I was like all about, I'm going to take advantage of the situation. And I walked home with so much money, more money than I've ever walked home with. And I said, I was hooked at that point. I said, I'll never be stressed again. Like, this was just a big relief for me. So at least one thing, that financial stress was gone when I went into that job. And
it's really interesting to me. Now, this is not a really good environment in a club like that. How many would agree with that? You know, but you were talking about this, I think, in your book a little bit there, and I noticed. You know, I've lost my train of thought, but I noticed that, and this is the thing, a lot of the girls that get caught in that kind of activity, whether it be strip club activity or prostitution or whatever, that whole sex, pornography and all of that, really, when you check into their background, you find out that it was something in their life was amiss because of the way they were treated by men. Mm-hmm. Bottom line.
Yes.
And so that was, I think, what began to happen. And because, now correct me if I'm wrong, because men were paying attention to you, and you felt an element of control over them.
Do you want?
Yeah.
Do you want to know where? Well, I didn't really think about this at the time, but I had been sexually abused when I was younger, and this came up later on. I didn't connect the dots, but I was sexually abused by when I first started modeling, and I was 15 years old. I went to a hair show, and it's really kind of cheesy when you first start modeling. You just don't know where to begin. But so I go to this hair show, and I have really long hair, and they said, well, I wanted to please, and so they said, would you let us do whatever we want? And I said, sure. Well, I get on stage, and they just chop my hair in front. I mean, it's just flying everywhere, and they're putting on a show. And so I'm watching my hair fly off the stage, and I'm like, and I came back with a cut that was shorter than my brother's cut. And so I was devastated. When this really handsome man came up to me and asked for my phone number, and he was 18 at the time, 18 or 19. He was older than me. You know, I was 15 years old, and my mom had said, listen, I don't really want her getting involved in modeling, but she really wants to do this job. So will you make sure that she's okay? Well, my dad said, yeah. She said, don't let her out of your sight. You know, this is kind of, we don't know this industry. Well, my dad dropped me off, and he left me there all day. So I was hanging out with this 18-year-old boy that was hitting on me, and you know, so I really liked him. I was very naive. We didn't actually have sex education, so I didn't really know anything about sex. And so when you like someone and you're young and they tell you, do this, you're ready to please. And I ended up getting sexually abused by this guy. And he said to me, you are so ugly that he goes, I'm going to go on a date I'm actually going to go out with a stripper afterwards. And that really hurt me, because I felt like, wow, I mean, I'm not enough. You know, I'm doing all this stuff and I'm still just not enough. And so I remember when I went to that strip club the very first night, that was actually the strip club that he said he was going to go to afterwards and meet a girl from there. And I remember dancing for a guy thinking, yeah, you could be that guy that I went out with, and you can't touch me now. You can't hurt me now. And I remember a feeling of being high, like this will never happen again. No one will ever touch me ever again, because it was this strip club was very strict. You couldn't touch the girls. You could look at me all you want, but you'll never touch me again. And I had this anger towards men, this just hostility towards them, and this joy of hurting men. Say, yes, I'm sure it's painful for you to look and not touch. And that made me feel very good and very powerful. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had control. Even if it was strangers, and even in that horrible circumstance, it made me get my control back, because I felt so out of control.
It's interesting, very interesting. And this is the development of all of what happened in her life. You can see what's happening here. Really interesting to me that Julie is an exception to the rule, because a member of my family went through the whole strip club deal. And, of course, a big part of that for a lot of girls is the drugs and the alcohol, and all of that kind of stuff. But you never really went down that path.
Well, not so much. I mean, I actually had
we'll talk about that.
I did have an experience with drugs in a very small sense. I was going, at the time that I was working at the strip club, I had a boyfriend that ended up doing drugs. I did not know that he did it. And all my girlfriends that were in the scene, that were dancing with me, they were all dabbled in it a little bit. Well, my one girlfriend said, I saw him at the clubs, and you know what he's doing behind your back. He's spending your money that you're earning on drugs. And she goes, because I saw him partying. And so we were in Las Vegas, and I traveled. I danced in Vegas and New York, and I went to all these different places with my girlfriends. And she says, do you want to know what he's doing? He was doing this pill called ecstasy. And I said, you know what? I'm so tired of being the good girl. I mean, I'm getting, I can't believe he's doing this behind my back. He's spending my money, and I'm working 5 nights a week, and he couldn't get a job. He just, every time he would say he'd get a job, he'd sabotage the interview so he wouldn't get work. And so I was supporting him, supporting me, and then his family kept asking me for money. I wasn't a good enough girlfriend for their son because I didn't know how to cook, but I was good enough to take money from. So I just felt financially responsible for a whole family now, and so I said, you know what, give me the pill. I mean, if this is what's, then let me try it. Let me see what this is like. Well, I tried ecstasy, and I was rocked out of my head in Las Vegas for 3 days. I couldn't even stand up straight, see straight, nothing. And drugs were not my thing. I was too much of a control freak, I think, to be that out of control feeling. I never got hooked on that. I thought, this is just horrible. Take the skin off me. I couldn't wait till the drugs were out of my system. So I did try it out of revenge, but it didn't work.
Well, I just wanted to mention that for the people that are listening to this, because a lot of them are into it. And that's one of the... let me mention something here at this point. There's, in my experience, certain things that open people up to demonic power. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Number one, the occult of any kind. Right. Or cults, or religion. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you hear what I just said?
Yep.
Religion. Not Jesus, but religion. Secondarily is drugs and alcohol. Yep. Seriously. Mm-hmm. And then thirdly is forms of sex that God does not let us participate in. Absolutely. Or that want us to participate in because it's bad for us, which is anything other than in marriage, really. Right. And the truth of the matter is that if you go to the mental hospitals, and we'll bring this up later, but if you go to the mental hospitals, every single one of the people in there, normally that's their background, one of those things. Mm-hmm. And you'll find out that I've prayed for many, many people, and that's where the enemy will get in most. So you can see how, as a young girl, you can see what's happening to these young people. And Julia's testimony is amazing. Now, it's going to get into some heavy things. We're going to talk a little bit about some things that I think are really relevant to the time and generation that we're living in. Because as you went to college and you're going out to these and working in this way, which is not healthy for you at all, of course, being in these clubs. And then you have a boyfriend, which is okay, and you can talk a little bit about that in a minute. And then also, she has an experience that she has with a college friend, and I'll let her talk about that with the board. Okay, so we're gonna get into this, and I want you to listen very carefully. If you're listening on CD or if you're listening here, please listen, because a lot of people that I've met over the life. In fact, how many got Facebook pages? You got Facebook pages? Well, most of the people on my that's how I met Julia. But most of the people on my Facebook pages are Christians. I've got 3,000 or some whatever it is on there, and I just know them all well. But it's supposed to be funny if you. But anyway, I see them, and they have astrology things on there all the time. They think it's okay to do a little dabbling in this thing, and they think it's okay to whatever it is, and they got the Harry Potter going, and they got this thing going. Folks, it's not. That is satanic cults and witchcraft people, which I've dealt with for years. I know them. Some of them are my friends that came out of that.
Yeah.
They do that stuff and make that stuff on purpose. And the purpose is to hook the young people, especially, into the occult world. And for some people, like Mike Warnke, it only took one time. He watched Bewitched, and it's an element of power. He didn't have any power in his life, and that was something that took him right down that path. Well, I want you to listen to her testimony. Listen to what happens here, and because there's so many kids, even on TV. How many have a television? Have you surfed? Charmed. Which will get you in 2 or 3 ways. The Ghost Girl, whatever that, Ghost Hunters, Paranormal Activity, Supernatural. I mean, it's one thing after another. Now, why is that going on? Because I'm telling you right now, Satan's after our young people. He's after everybody, but especially the younger generation. So listen, okay, go ahead.
Well, I have there's a background to my father wasn't the greatest father, and I have to say it's not really his fault. He grew up with a father who had got involved in Scientology and gave all his money to Scientology, left the family. My grandmother went crazy, and my dad, at 11 years old, had to go get a job, support my grandmother, and take care of his sister. So, to my dad's credit, I have to say, he has ended up being a great father, comparatively speaking, with what he grew up with. And so that was my grandfather. He was involved with the occult. And the Scientology is an occultist, very, very occultish religion. And what happens with Scientology is the higher that you move up in the ranks, the more money that you give, what they do is they give you more powers. And it's powers of Satan, powers to move things, powers to do what's called astral projection. And when I was younger, he told me, I fly here, I go here in my dreams, would you like to do that? I fly with a silver cord. And I remember going, yeah, I would, and I did. And I did. When I was a little girl, I remember having these dreams where I was flying and visiting other houses, and they were so real. I mean, looking back now, I know that it was not a dream. I was actually flying, and there was a cult, whatever I was doing.
Now, let me stop just 1 second. I want to interrupt your thought, but I want to say this because, I'm a teacher. I have to say these things. That's very important because a lot of you people that are listening do not understand. You don't have to be involved in the occult. If it's in your family group, it'll come on you.
Exactly.
Unless you break the power of that, it will keep you in bondage, and it is a serious thing. That's what the Bible says, that curse will come on from to 1,000, whatever it is, generations. So that's a very important point. Go ahead.
So I would just want to lay the foundation there. When my girlfriend at college said, this is really fun. It totally doesn't cost any money, because I was just about money. She's like, but we got a big test it was a history test. We have a big test. She goes, and if you play with the Ouija board, you can get the answers for your test. And I said, wow, I'm really trying hard here, but this would be great, because working on the weekends, and this would be great to push it to the next level of So I did. I tried it with her, and it worked. But the thing was, and it covered everything we were dealing with the Cold War. I remember specifically that it said it was going to ask this question and this question. It was going over everything that my teacher would have asked, but it didn't go over. So I only studied those items, and then it ended up being the exact opposite. So I ended up flunking that test. But I said, wow, it's amazing that this thing actually knew what subject we were talking about, and it was sharply moving. And the reason why I say this is because some people will work on a Ouija board, and they will not get any results, and they laugh, and they say, that stuff's not real. Well, I had already had such a heavy background with occult activity that my grandfather's activity basically opened up my activity to be extremely active, I guess. And so when I did it, it was very powerful. And she said, wow, when you sit here, I mean, it was moving when I just sat there. It was just really, so I told my brother, I said, this thing is crazy. This is amazingly fun. I mean, we did it for hours and it just felt like seconds, So
you and your brother were doing this? Yeah.
So my brother came to visit me at school, and then he said, I said, why don't we try this? And so we sat down at the board, and he said, I don't even believe in this stuff. He goes, this is mumbo jumbo.
Mm-hmm. That's okay. Just keep going.
Oh, so
they'll help her. She has
okay. So I said, he didn't believe in it. He didn't think that it worked. I said, okay, well, if you don't believe in it, just sit down and watch. And I did it, and it was moving like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then he played with it all night. Actually, my brother, who was very critical, was hooked, like a drug.
Mm-hmm. And so, when you were playing this board, and it was like supernaturally, answering questions and all of that kind of stuff, and you got kind of hooked on that. Was that something that you felt was like
is that demonic?
Yeah, I mean, no. This is something that she's has a problem with.
Okay.
So I'm helping her with this.
Okay.
But the Ouija board is thousands of millions of people have these things in their home. I actually played it myself when I was a kid. I've seen a lot of people play it, and people think it's harmless, but it's just another way for Satanism or the occultism to get into people's homes. So you and your brother were playing. Scott, how much time do we have left in this session? Okay. So and how did you? I mean, somebody just introduced this to you, and then you started playing it, and then you might want to go a little bit into.
Well, the thing that's kind of scary about the Ouija board is that it used to be, I don't know if it still is, available at toy stores.
Right, it is.
And and you can do it at home, and kids know how to make a homemade Ouija board because they show you online. All you need to do is make a board with letters and numbers, and then create your own pointer. And so it's very easy to dabble in the occult. I think people want to be entertained so much. I think that we've made ourselves so dead. We're sitting there texting on the phone. We don't connect with other people. That we want to feel a connection to something and have some kind of control. So we're tempted with these crazy things that they're entertaining for a moment. It's wonderful. It's an entertaining thing, but they don't understand the heaviness that comes along with that, the depression that comes with that, the suppression that comes with that. So when my brother had played with the board that first night, he had a great time, but he ended up playing on his own. I said, I got to go to bed. I got to go to work, and I woke up the next morning, and he was still awake, and he was petrified. And he goes, Julia, some really bad stuff happened, and I didn't want to wake you up. He goes, but I saw faces morphing on the ceiling, changing from shape to shape. And he said, fat faces, skinny faces, they were swirling all around my head. And he goes, and all of a sudden, all these faces were laughing, and he goes, and then I felt them go into my head. He goes, I don't know how to describe it, but the feeling was like a suction. He goes, my head's been spinning and buzzing. He goes, and just weird stuff is happening. My body's moving, and I'm not telling it to move, and it's doing weird stuff. I said, Dan, you just need some sleep. I said, you just haven't slept all night long. So let's be logical here. I said, it was a great time, it was fun. I said, but you're just taking it. And he goes, no, I'm telling you, I just don't feel right. Something feels real weird to me. So that's kind of what happened with him.
So this actually, when the first time he ever played it, right? Was the first
the very first time, yeah.
The very first time he plays this Ouija board.
We tried to summon my grandfather too. We had a spoon, and so maybe that was bad. That was it.
The connection there.
Right, my grand.
So the very first time they played this, now see, this is the thing that people don't understand. You can't even look at an astrology chart or do any of that kind of thing, and it's not funny. The very first time that it happens, you will open yourself up to some kind of demonic spirit. And so what happened is these evil spirits actually came into her brother at that moment. And so this is why it's so dangerous, and so we want to shout this from the housetop. Then you can go ahead and explain what went on.
I honestly feel like when I got possessed with demons, it happened at that time when I was playing with my brother, because I didn't realize it, but I was seeing the same things he was. You know, when we separated, I worked that weekend, and when I saw him back on Monday, I noticed my apartment was different. Things were moved around, and I was not present. Nobody was there. So I said, what's going on here? And when I went to meet my brother, he hadn't slept all weekend, so he looked horrible. And I stayed with him, and while I was staying with him, we were both seeing the same things. It was like movies on our eyelids. Every time we closed our eyes, we would both see the same thing. I would see, like, it's hard to describe. I would see rapes, I would see murders, I would see blood everywhere, I would see animals being ripped open. Just things that I couldn't even describe, I would never even think of in my own head, were being played on my eyelids. And so every time I tried to close my eyes, I couldn't get rest. And he was seeing the same thing. I go, Daniel, I'm seeing this on my eyelids. He goes, I'm seeing the same exact movie. So we were seeing the same movie. And I go, that's bizarre. So I thought, well, that's just weird. And I thought, he might have demons, but I don't have them, because I didn't have that suctioning thing going on with me. So,
did you just let me ask you this: at the moment this is all going on, did your mind go demons, or was that something that you believed in, or something that you really, or did you think something's going on because you said you came in and everything was moved around in your room and all that kind of stuff? And
yes,
I'll talk just a little bit about that part of it.
Okay. Well, I didn't really think. I didn't know. You didn't know what was going on. I didn't really know what was going on, but my apartment was. It looked like someone had went through my stuff, went in my apartment, and it looked like someone was sitting on my bed. I had a photo album that was inside my closet that was buried in the back. Pulled out. I mean, the closet door was broken. You couldn't even get in the closet door, and it was buried in the back. It was laid out on the bed like someone was looking at it.
Yeah.
And then there was an indentation on the pillow. It looked like someone was sitting there, actually, but you just couldn't see who the person was. And my electric toothbrush was going off. Every single cabinet door was open, and I was very neat and clean, really anal about my... So, I mean, it was just like someone said, hey, I want to let you know I'm here. I am here.
So the reason I wanted you to bring that up is not to glorify this stuff, but have you seen all this stuff in the movies and stuff? Now, see, a lot of that's all made up and some of it and stuff, but there's a real element of that, and she experienced that in her own apartment, in her own apartment, and you thought, probably at the time, I would be thinking, who broke into my apartment and, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff.
The first thought was like maybe somebody broke in, but the feeling that I got when I was going through the place, I felt like 1,000 eyes were watching me. And it wasn't, when someone doesn't like you and they give you that look of hate and you just can feel that tension in the room, I felt that times 10. Everywhere I went, no matter where I went in my apartment, I could feel people just staring at me and very close to my face, just like hate, radiating from nowhere. And I felt like I literally felt like my place was going to explode. And that's how I felt like when I was sitting there. I go, something bad's going to happen in here, because I feel like there's if I just light a match, the whole place is going to light on fire. Like I could just feel this fire. It was just bizarre. I had to get out of there.
So it's kind of like the very atmosphere was changed.
Yes, the very atmosphere was changed. It was electrified.
It's kind of like how many have ever walked into somebody's home or your own home when somebody was fighting?
Yes.
How many know that there's a cloud there and it ain't the glory?
Yeah, it ain't the glory. Yeah.
And this morning when we were worshiping God, that God's atmosphere. But you see, that was almost the opposite of that.
Yes.
It was fear, right?
It was pure evil, honestly.
Pure evil. Yeah.
I was afraid, but it wasn't fear that was being projected onto me. It was pure hatred. Whatever it was wanted me dead, wanted me out, and I was scared out of my mind. I didn't want to go back to my apartment ever again. I was so scared.
Not.
So I went and I went to visit my brother to find out what was going on with him. And when I saw his face, and then I told him what had happened to me, he says, "Julie, you got to sit down." He goes, I sit at the computer, my hand starts typing messages about stuff that's going on in this part of the country. He says, and then I look it up, and that's going on. He goes, I know the future. I know things. He goes, about people that I don't even know. He goes, and on top of it, he goes, I'm not able to control my body. Sometimes I'm just, all of a sudden he'll be like, "Roar," and just act weird. scared. And I saw it in him and around him, and I said, I'm not going to leave him. So it freaked me out, but I didn't know how to get help because our church did not even acknowledge demonic possession. And I said, well, it's in the Bible. So, we brought him to the church, but we were scared. That was kind of our last-ditch effort, was the church, because there was so much judgment against that stuff. And we knew we were bad kids for even playing with the Ouija board, so we didn't want to deal with that kind of judgment. So I actually ended up calling a radio station because my friend said, call this guy. His name is Freak. He's on this show called Man Cow. And I don't know if you remember Man Cow.
Let's call Freak at Man Cow.
Right.
That's the answer.
That's what his name was, Freak. And he goes, I just heard him talking about demonic stuff the other day. And he has a friend that lives underneath the ground. He's a satanic recluse, but he knows how to throw out demons. And I said, well, I mean, we're desperate. We have gone on 4 or 5 nights now with no sleep. And so we were just desperate. And so we called the radio station, and Man Cow was like, all these people were calling in, and Dana was manifesting some weird stuff. And he goes, man, so it became a freak show. For about 5 hours straight, we were on the Man Cow. It was actually known as one of the best of Man Cow shows. And I know. And one of the people from our church said, wait a second, that is Julie and Daniel from our church. Well, we had given our location just by saying we're at our friend's Joy's house. Well, the pastor had heard us on the radio and said, oh, I know where Joy's house is. And so he came over and he said, what are you guys doing? And he tried to help in some way. But
wow. So you went to this satanic guy, and everybody heard you all over the Chicagoland area.
Yeah.
Wow.
It ended up being he wanted us to go underground because he wouldn't come. And I said, if he'll come and see us, we'll see him. But I said, I can't take what if he doesn't come out alive or something? Oh. I just didn't know, so the pastor got there before we went to the guy's house. We were like, should we or should we not? So, yeah. Oh, he just brought up a point.
Sure.
When we were younger, and I'd say we were about almost graduated, so this is like maybe I was about 16 years old. We also actually had a UFO experience. And this is so bizarre because if you know my brother, he is the most logical person you would ever meet. And if you would have told me that I never believed in UFOs. I thought that was a bunch of crazy stuff. But I actually saw one, and he did too. And in high school, he always stayed up very late at night, and he called me it was 2 o'clock in the morning. He started screaming my name, Julia, come down here now. So I run downstairs, just waking up, and I see he's pointing out the window. He's like, just look. And at the very end of my street, I see a UFO. It's a big silver dome. It had green, yellow, and red lights on it, and they were spinning, and it moved really fast, and it disappeared. But I saw it for that split second. He goes, that was hovering above our house. I'm getting the chills now. He said, that was hovering above our house. He goes, and it was making this whoom, whoom. He said, just like the movies. He goes, and it was hovering here. He goes, I was petrified. He goes, and I tried to scream your name for a couple of minutes, but nothing would come out. And he said, and it was over our house. And he goes, and when I called your name, it went down to the end of the block, and it hovered there. So I saw it for that 1 second that I saw it. And so that was our only experience of it. But just so you know, there is a connection between Scientology and UFOs, and it's going to come out at some point. I know that people don't know very much about Scientology, but there's a connection between the alien world and the demonic world. There is no such thing as aliens. No. They're just demons that are trying to contact humans in a physical form.
Absolutely.
And
I'll be teaching seminars on that. I'm quite familiar with this subject. Actually, to be honest with you, almost everybody who has been abducted, had an experience of being abducted by a UFO. Well, if you check in their background, they're hooked to the occult somehow. Yeah. And so don't let it fool you. I wouldn't be surprised to see beings come down and say, "Hey, we're here to enlighten the earth," or something. Who knows? But the truth of the matter is that whole UFO thing. It's another thing. That's all demonic. It's just another part of the occult world.
Yep.
And so stay away from that too. You know, I mean, these are good warnings that you're giving us today.
That's the thing. They're so bizarre. They're so random. They're just different little things that have happened over time. And we thought, oh, that's a weird experience, you know, but we don't want people to think we're crazy, so we're not going to talk about that. And so I didn't talk about any of these things because I'm a sane person, and I don't want people to think I'm insane. And I've seen insane people. So, but, you know, there is a connection, and this is the thing. With music today, there's people out there from the occult that pray over their music.
Yes.
So people don't understand, when they listen to regular radio, that you don't understand the power of music, that these people, it's not just a nice little fun tuning, let's get over it. You're listening to something that someone's praying that curses be put on you, that you're going to be blinded by the enemy, and that the more that you listen to these influences, a little bit of TV here, a little bit of here. I'd like to describe it as like a string attaching to you. So here's, you've got a string of music over here. You've got a string of a bad TV show over here. You've got a string of your grandfather's occultism here. You're interested in UFOs, so you're looking up that stuff. And now you've got strings all attached to you. And so what happens is all these strings are literally binding you and blinding you. So that's when I got cleared from demonic activity, the Lord told me to go. I can't fast because I have a weird blood sugar problem. We have diabetes in our family, so whenever I fast, I just get very sick. So I said, Lord, I'm serious. I want to fast, but every time I fast, I get really sick. He said, no, I don't want you dying, or I don't want you getting sick, but I want you to fast the world. And I said, what does that mean? He said, I don't want you watching TV. I don't want you listening to the radio. I don't want you to being influenced by any of that stuff. And so I said, absolutely. So when all these demonic forces were being cleared out of my life, and it took a period, about 2 years, of them slowly coming out of me as I'm reading the Word, because I had to do it on my own. Nobody really taught me. So, but the Lord said, it's very important that you don't get any more extra on you. So you need to stay clean, and you need to not listen to the radio. And I said, well, that's a little freakish, but I mean, I was so ready to hear what God had to say that I did. And it works. Now, when I listen to the radio now, I could feel the demonic influence, and I say, oh my gosh, and this is being put on our children.
Yeah.
And there's no escapism from it because it's everywhere. You know, so.
Well, that's amazing. We're going to wind up this first hour in a second. But she told me she's not a preacher, but I think she's doing pretty good. I got to share something with you. When I got saved, filled with the Holy Ghost, I had $10,000 worth of records. And I mean, I tell you what, that's tough, man. I mean, I got these records. I mean, and the Lord said to me, I want you to go throw those away, go burn those records. Yep. And I said, Lord, I don't want to go burn my records. I mean, why should I have to do that? Because some of the music's okay, but I mean, there was some things in there that weren't okay, right? Mm-hmm. And you know what he said to me? He said, because the main thing is, it's linked to your rebellion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so for me, I went and burned those. Now listen, it was hard. Eric clapped, everybody. God, you know, it was hard. I went over there and I put this all in there and I fired it up. But listen, I heard things scream.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Out of the
people, one of the worst right now, and I'm just going to name some of them, are some of the little girls they use, you know, Goo Goo Gaga Meatloaf or whatever her name is, and then, you know, you got that's demonic, folks.
Yes, it is.
And a lot of the imagery is occultic and
100%. 100%.
And so the Illuminatic part of it, you know, I have a friend that's going to come here. We're going to bring him in. He'll talk about that but I mean, they literally, the videos and stuff are done and shot because those images are projected into the minds of the kids. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I mean, this is serious business. So we're going to wrap this session up. Now, listen, isn't this interesting? How many are enjoying this? Is this interesting or what? Okay. So we're going to wrap this session up. We're going to give you about a 10-minute break. Please don't harass Julia yet.